So let's get into the Aster Arcadia separation. So obviously, for those that don't know, Aster Arcadia was a VTuber, or what they call a liver, for Niji Sanji. Now, currently, his channel is down. Now, we're going to get into that because he has been, quote unquote, separated. But Aster Arcadia did have a very large channel. And for those that are non-VTuber fans, it's always shocking, I think, to people how big these people are. This channel has almost as many subs as I do. It's at 308, right? So it's just below me. I just shot up past this. But you know, he's not the biggest talent at Niji Sanji EN. These are not the biggest VTubers out there, period. There are VTubers with massive YouTube numbers. And if you look at the profit and revenue, they continue to be, as an industry, a leader in profit and revenue, both ad revenue, super chats, etc., on YouTube. An amazing revenue generation machine. And different companies have different strategies for how they pull that down. The other company, you think of HoloLive, Cover Corporation, tends to follow more of an idol model, building up kind of a massive following for these, building them up as idols. Whereas Niji Sanji has more of a shotgun approach. They throw everybody out there. A lot of them fail, but one or two of them rise to the top. Some of them are just kind of stable revenue generators, and they kind of see what sticks. And that's the Niji Sanji model. So we're following today the Niji Sanji model, in which they throw stuff out there. They kind of let them battle royale on YouTube and all the other platforms and just see who's successful. And it tends to be, as with many companies, and we're going to see this today, that the people that do better have an advantageous position. And that is not abnormal for any corporation. And I hate to break it to people, but corporations, at the end of the day, care about profit and loss, care about assets and liabilities. The second you are more of a liability than you are an asset, you're gone. And that's the story here today of Aster Arcadia. He became more of a liability than an asset. And at that point, they decided to separate. And we are going to explain exactly what separate means. So let's check out the Aster Arcadia separation stuff. Okay, here we go. Okay, so Aster Arcadia, and we're going to bring up this twice, has now been separated. And that word is extremely important, and I'm going to explain it at the end, but we're going to have to get some background on this first. Why was he separated? Why would they do this? Why would this happen? He's separated as of July. Now, mind you, what is the date of this post? July 15th. So they decided to separate him immediately. This is not something where there was any wait, where there's any lag time. Typically, there would be a graduation stream. There was not. So it is very atypical of Niji to do this, to function in this way. If it was on fully good terms, there would be a graduation. If there was a queue, if he ended up the regular queue of graduation, that would be that. Now, it could be a normal time when his contract just ended. We'll get to the hypos later. There's many different hypos here. But it's not what you typically see, and that raises a lot of questions. And the use of that word separation is intentional. It is not accidental. The words that they use were definitely vetted by a lawyer. Now, it might be a lawyer that's paid, $750 an hour, but was definitely vetted that they used the word separated and not terminated. About Aster, the allegations, at least when I picked this up, started about in March of 2024. And these happened with some documents that came out in a Google Doc involving Luca Kaneshiro and Raziel Warmonic. And I've covered that. I covered that in previous streams. In fact, last year, I think I covered that in 2024. So you guys can go back and check out some of the Luca and Raziel stuff when that came out. Of course, a lot of that alleging very serious behavior. But one kind of weird thing in that document was, in all of this about Luca and Raziel, there was these comments about Aster Arcadia. It was sort of a weird thing where, like, this whole document was about Luca, and then all of a sudden there's this section about Aster Arcadia, and you're like, whoa, well, what's going on here? And the allegation here was that Luca had multiple girls coming to him about issues within the company, and they were complaining about harassment and wouldn't do anything about it. And it was discussed with Alira and Raziel. And I personally told Luca to gather as much evidence as possible and bring it to management. That is Niji Sanji management. since it shouldn't be their responsibility to regulate. To my understanding, nothing was done. And to clarify, it was Aster. Next, we have here Raziel Warmornik getting a cease and desist from AnyColor. That is the parent corporation of Niji Sanji. So she had a cease and desist to stop talking about this. And she was told to never talk about this again, about both Luca and Aster, to shut up, shut up, shut up. And following this in April, they issued a policy change. So they literally changed their policy on harassment and misconduct. And I will read this because I know it's the print and may be hard to read. So let me read this change they made immediately following the Luca and Aster stuff. They said, AnyColor takes its responsibility towards employees and those it manages and treats any allegations of misconduct seriously. It reacts appropriately to the allegations brought to its attention, including via personal consultations with human resources and/or legal. And since April 12, 2024, through its internal whistleblowing policy for livers. So what they're saying there is they implemented a policy in response to this incident. And as somebody who used to write policies for corporations, that's what I did ad nauseum for a while. And even when I was a contractual employee, after I ended as a formal general counsel, I continued to write policies for years. In fact, I wrote a policy even like 8 months ago for a small company. Writing a policy is not for the benefit of the employee. And let me be very clear about this. It's for the benefit of the employer. A policy is to cover the employer's ass, because all the employer has to do is follow the policy and say, oh, we followed our policy. And from a legal standpoint, most courts will go, that's good. You had a policy, you followed it. That's good enough for us. You were doing your due diligence and you were taking reasonable efforts by following your policy. And that's why these policies exist. They do not exist to solely protect the employee, right? They may have that as a secondary effect, but they're mainly to cover the company. That's why they're there. So we had more messages coming out, and this was the real thing. And this was both what came up, and this is one message from Discord, but also there's stuff that came up with Twisty, who's another liver at Niji Sanji. And I'm just going to read this out. When I had a mental breakdown and went to Twitch, Aster was saying he wants to fly me out to Japan and saying weird S stuff. S pesting my friends. I went to management. They wouldn't speak to him. I was really considered graduating. So this is one of these main allegations against Aster, is that Aster was offering to fly people out to Japan. Now, that offer alone, and I know this is going to bother people, at least in a Japanese company or in a company that lacks a specific policy saying you can't do certain things, offering to fly someone out is not necessarily illegal. However, it's shady, and it can be a figure in certain circumstances if he was also saying things that were involving S actions, could be a form of S harassment, workplace harassment, right? A power dynamic harassment. So it could be, given the appropriate evidence, right, that would need to be provided, something that is illegal, particularly in America. So in America, if you have somebody says, I'm going to fly you out, and there's a expectation from that, that's what's called quid pro quo. I'm going to do this for you, you do this for me. That would be illegal. That would be straight up illegal, right? If it's very straight up. Now, what he tried to play off and what the defense was is, oh, I was joking, or oh, it was a half joke. The language was half joke. So trying to play it off there, playing it there. And the other thing was, and we'll see this later with Twisty, is there were fans that he was inviting out to do this. Now, once again, is it illegal to invite to fly out a fan or whatever else? No. In fact, many idols do this. They end up marrying a fan or marrying their top fan or whatever else. That's something that does happen in idol culture, in places, etc., where famous people, whatever, might even get with a fan, right? That can happen. There was rock stars had groupies, right? Not necessarily illegal, but it could be illegal given the right circumstances, patterns, etc., and could be beyond that a shady practice and horrible PR for a company. Horrible PR for a company. Any company that is caught with an employee doing this would look horrible, even in Japan. This got really bad for Aster because some people out there, and shout out to Techie here and to Mugen. Mugen's video had 1 million views over here. Techie's, I think, on 100K or something like that. But these are big creators, and they covered this, and it didn't look good. I mean, the title from Tectone was "They're Hiding a Predator," and how a massive VTuber corp is trying to hide a predator. Not a good look. Not a good look in December of 2024. Not a good look at all for them when people are covering it, when people are giving it that level of attention. And trust me, Niji Sanji is paying attention to social media coverage. They absolutely are. If they could silence media coverage, they would. They can't, but they would if they could. They would if they could. This didn't look good for them. So they knew they had to do something. They knew to take action. And what does Niji do? Well, Niji makes a statement. Let's read that statement, shall we? Thank you for your continued support of Niji Sanji and Niji Sanji EN. Regarding the recent controversy, AnyColor has determined the following course of action. We have initiated an independent third-party investigation into the issues and will share the outcome with our livers and community. Okay, full stop there. I hate to break it to you, but no independent third-party investigation is ever fully independent. To be very fair, and if you watch the movie The Big Short, they kind of brought this up with the credit rating agencies and that kind of close relationship there. But this applies very many places across the board with independent audits. You can always find someone you can pay that's going to tell you what you want to hear, and that's going to come up with a report that says what you want it to say. That's always possible. And companies know, especially independent companies know, if they're always exposing companies, they're never going to get hired. No company is going to hire an independent company that is out there exposing people. Now, there are good ones. There are good beans out there. There are good companies. There are companies that do honest work, that do good stuff. However, if a company so chooses, they can hire the people that are going to be the yes men, because those people are out there too. There are good ones, but there's also ones that are going to tell you what they want. So they had this audit. The investigation will focus on the issue of harassment and unauthorized information leaking to outside parties, and will include a thorough review of the company policies and their implementation. Whoa, wait up. I'm all for investigating harassment, but what's this about investigating leakage? It seems to me, and you see leakage and policies, they're more interested, and they were more interested when they put this out, in covering themselves than they were in finding the truth. They were more interested in saying who leaked than figuring out what happened. Also, so after this went down in December, we have Aster Arcadia's famous cooking stream. The cooking stream that was literally delayed forever. So this guy, after all of this went down, after all these statements were made in December of 2024, it is now July. This guy said he was going to do a cooking stream and never did a cooking stream. It was delayed. You see 38 days there. And even False gave an update here. He still did not do his cooking stream, and it was moved to July 24th, a stream that will now never happen. The cooking is canceled. The cooking is off the table. He did not find the ingredients on Mount Everest. So indeed, another thing that happened, and this is very relevant, this literally happened like 3 weeks ago, is the termination of Twisty Amanozako. Now, I am not going into this in detail. Twisty was allegedly terminated. Now look at this language difference here with Twisty. Did they use separated? No. What did they say with Twisty? Terminated. And they followed that up with an explanation of why Twisty was terminated. Twisty was terminated for discriminatory speech in direct violation of our contract and not tolerated. So that is a termination. So a termination, you are going to give a reason. A termination is almost always, I've rarely ever see a termination that is not for cause, meaning with reason and by the employer. The employer is doing the cutting. It's not a contract expiring. It's not a mutual agreement. The employer is saying, we have a reason to terminate you per our contract. Now, with Twisty was deep in the mines on this. Twisty, over the past months, was revealing a lot of information on Aster Arcadia, including the fact that Aster Arcadia wanted to fly out her and her friend to Japan and was offering to stay in the same hotel room with them. And very, very interesting situation there. Once again, could be perceived under American law as kind of workplace harassment, Japanese law. There's a lot of situations. I have a friend who's a Japanese, works in a Japanese company. They're a salary woman, a Japanese woman. And they tell me some of the things that go down in the company that are just kind of tolerated. And let me just say the culture can be a little bit different, if you know what I mean. But certainly in an American court, this would not look good. But Twisty was terminated. Now, this is very important because Twisty had a lot to say about Aster. And I guarantee you, as part of this, they had Twisty sign an NDA. However, they're learning from the Selentowski incident, they're learning from Matara, that NDAs will not keep people completely shut up. Eventually, people are going to ask questions, and the information over time is going to leak out. And Niji Sanji is not necessarily going to initiate an international lawsuit over a small leak. They're generally not going to do that. They would look petty. They would look guilty, etc. They'd be the bully. They'd be Goliath picking on David. People are going to root for David. It's not going to look good for them. And they're realizing that, in fact, NDAs might not even be enforceable for some of this stuff. In fact, in the U.S., under certain states and federal law, if it involves harassment that's of a sexual nature, they might not even be able to enforce their NDA. It's actually an unenforceable NDA if it's something in certain states, in certain places, or certain types of harassment. It might not even be enforceable. They might be able to throw out the NDA. So because of that, they thought, okay, we got rid of Twisty. We probably sent an NDA, which will keep her quiet in the short term, maybe, especially if we pay her. However, we've got to fix the problem. Let's get into separation versus termination. What's the difference? This is a big one. Pay attention, guys. Legally, we're talking legal education here, guys. This is very important. Separation means any form of ending an employment relationship by either party. It can be voluntary or involuntary. It's ambiguous. So they can terminate you, but call it a separation. So every termination is a separation. But there are situations where there are separations that are not terminations, right? Because it could be, hey, I want to go. That's a separation, right? If the liver said, hey, I want to go, it's under my contract or my contract's expiring, that's a separation. It doesn't imply guilt. So Niji Sanji is not acknowledging anything by using the word separation. They don't have to give a reason. And under their own contract, which I have reviewed, they can separate at any time. They can separate for no reason. Niji can do whatever they want. Very, very ambiguous. Termination is when an employer, not the employee, the employer, ends the employment relationship, usually involuntary for cause, for a reason. So going back, terminated for discriminatory speech. We know that's not all. We know there's more, but terminated for cause. Separated, oh, look, no reason. Oh, look, we took their whole channel down. That's what's going on there. Why is this a win for Niji? Why is this a win for Niji? Niji sisters are eating good tonight. Niji sisters are like, you know what? Maybe we don't hate Niji. Maybe we don't hate Legal Mindset because he's telling us how Niji wins here, right? I'm telling you how Niji gets the W here, legally at least. Legally at least. So the allegations have not been proven from a legal standpoint. And it's not Niji Sanji's job to do that. There's nothing that requires them legally to prove or disprove these. All they had to do was follow their policy, which says we're going to have an investigation. And we don't have to ever have the results of that. The results of that investigation never have to be public. It's a private investigation. They can say it's third party, but we're never going to see the full results of that, ever. So all they did was do that, and that's all they had to do legally. And there's no time limit on that. There's nothing that says that investigation has to be done in 1 month or 2 months or 3 months. So they can say that they've been investigating this since December or even since last year. They could say, hey, we've been looking into this since April or December. It doesn't matter. All they have to say is we did that, and legally they did their duty. That's it. So let's hypothetical two scenarios. The first scenario is the allegations are true. So if the allegations are true, if everything against Aster Arcadia is true, let's pretend. And once again, it's hypothetical because I am fair, innocent until proven guilty, still in a court of law. But we'll say, let's pretend that they're true. That Aster is somebody who was trying to fly people out. He was going after fans. He was going after livers. He was preying on people. Niji Sanji has deniability. They can say, we didn't know about that. Or they can say, our investigation revealed it, and as soon as we knew, we fired him. Because we don't know how long that took. We don't know when they got those results. We don't know what they decided. So they could say, hey, we follow policy, and as soon as we found out, we terminated him. It's a win, even if they're true. Now, if it's false, here's the big win. So for our Aster stands out there who said Aster didn't do nothing wrong, my baby didn't do nothing wrong. Well, here's why Niji threw your liver under the bus. Here's why. AnyColor is having to spend money defending a talent that is a brand risk that is getting multiple millions of views on YouTube. People, large YouTubers, are calling this dude out on the regular and exposing your company to a level of PR that approaches Selentowski in the aggregate. Is it worth it to keep around one liver who has not streamed in months, has not generated revenue for you in months? Is that worth it to your brand? And at the end of the day, Niji Sanji only cares about this. And companies, at the end of the day, really care about this. Even your favorite companies, they care about assets and they care about liabilities. Are you an asset to them or are you a liability? And at this point, the amount of money that Aster Arcadia was bringing in was no longer sufficient to support the liability of him from a PR, from a brand risk, from a potentially legal standpoint, because if this went long enough and something happened and Aster Arcadia did something with a fan or did something with a liver and there was a lawsuit, the liability is massive. And what is he making? He wasn't the most profitable liver. He's not the guy making them the most money or the guy or girl making the most money. If you're at the very top of the food chain, yeah, they are going to protect you. They are going to come out and pull out the stops. But he simply wasn't that guy. And because of that, I'm so sorry. You're getting the bow and you're getting shown the door. Riku is showing you the door and he's building that second yacht. He's trying to keep it from being sunk because he's not going to take a hit to his balance sheet, particularly in a time. Because listen, guys, their stock is up. And this is something my brother in crime here, Mujin, kind of looked over. They've been doing aggressive stock buybacks for the past years. That means Riku has been taking his own money to buy back the stock in order to inflate the price. And that's legal. I'm not saying it's illegal. It's perfectly legal for them to do that. But understand that's what they've had to do. That's not a good thing to do. It's not a great thing to have to buy back your own stock.